Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Living Faith at Work podcast.
Hey, guys.
We're finally doing an introduction. I feel like every time we just jump into yeah, it's awesome. I think okay, we'll go back to the introduction. My name is Jorge Espinoza. I am one of the leaders at Living Faith at Work, and I have the incredible privilege to talk and be a co-host with my good friend Bradley McCoy. Bradley, I guess anything you want to share about yourself?
Yeah. Jorge, I'll share about both of us. Jorge and I have a passion for faith in the marketplace, and we've been doing business together for well over a decade, coming up on 15 years together, which is really fun. And Jorge and I have had a journey where we've been at different companies. We've been together at Target for a few years. Jorge's now down in Arizona at Sprouts, and we just love to enable and equip and inspire some folks to live out their faith in the marketplace. And we've been through many seasons together where it's been hard, where it's been like God's doing a ton of stuff. And we're just excited to share more and share some stories about what God's doing in the marketplace.
I love it. Yeah, Bradley and you and I have been, like you said, through so many seasons, and God has been faithful through them all. And I'm excited to talk about kind of the journey that we've taken personally to get some ERG, employee resource group, going in, like an official resource group going within a company. And I think today we're going to talk about specifically for those that are kind of starting the journey of now that you've, first and foremost, like the first step is creating a small group. Like we talked about the last episode. That's the first step. Get your small group going. That's the foundation, 100%. Get the small group going. And then from there, the natural progression is an ERG, or employee resource group. And so I think I'm excited because I think, Bradley, you're the one that actually has the most experience with this between the two of us. And I'm excited to talk about that with you and get your insight on how that progressed as you guys went from small groups to then Target acknowledging the Christian network as an ERG. And I'm super excited because I think there's some really good things that happened out of that. And first and foremost, like the favor that God provided to be able to provide that opportunity for you all. So anything that you want to add on before we kind of jump into it?
Yeah, I think there's so many people who are excited about faith at work that are tuning in, and we just want to give some practical guidance on what does that look like? Like, what's a healthy path? So many people are like, how are people going to find out that we have this group and that there's Christians in my company? And I think there has been so many things we've learned in the last 15 years. And today's conversation is like, what does it look like to take healthy, intentional steps to step into an employee resource group? And it's not always the right thing to do. Like, it depends on your situation in your company. And we're going to talk about that, what it looks like. We've also had the privilege not only to get it going at Target, but we've helped over 20 companies let's figure out our employee resource group. What does this look like? And every single one has had a different journey. But we're going to talk about some best practices, what we've learned, maybe what we wouldn't do and what we would do. And so excited for our time today.
Love it. Yeah. So I guess let's jump into it, Bradley. What are some of the natural progressions that you see or you have seen or experienced with the actual kind of ERG progress going into a corporate company and kind of asking, hey, what does it take to become an acknowledged employee resource group? And then what are some of the barriers that you faced and what are some of the things that you potentially would have done differently?
Yeah, I would say just because you're a recognized employee resource group doesn't mean that's a better thing, like given where you're at. There's been so many times where it's like, okay, now that we're official and we're under Target's belonging umbrella, there's a lot more steps and a lot more red tape and things that we have to follow from an organizational standpoint. When I joke around about being underground Bible studies, underground small groups, we had a lot more freedom and it was a lot easier to move. So I would say there's not always this like, get to an employee resource group as fast as you can. I would say most companies that we've worked with have this natural progression of, okay, I know I'm a Christian. I'm going to find some other Christians. We're going to start a small group like we talked about last episode. And then once that small group starts to multiply and you actually have leaders and additional resources, you have multiple people who are willing to help lift and figure out how to bring things to life, then you're in a better position to actually go and start an employee resource group and reach out to HR. I would say if it's just a handful of you, the amount of energy and work and effort, it might distract you from what the real work is, and that's living your faith out at work. And so I would take your time and be intentional before you reach out to HR. I feel like so many people we talk to, that's like, I found 2 people. We're going to talk to the head of HR about creating a Christian group. And you probably could have a small group for a year, or multiply a couple of small groups over a year or 2 before you really take that step. And that would be my encouragement, is like, be intentional in your build. And just because now you have a logo on the company intranet and there's a link there, and maybe you can, during onboarding, they might mention you with some of the other Hispanic, groups that are belonging, African American and Christian. But like, before you get there, there's a lot of building that you can do. And I think that's where you create healthy culture in the beginning. And if you run right away to be like employee resource group, that culture is really going to be defined by your HR department, less organically with the Christians who are involved. And so I would say those are the things that I would guide and give encouragement on. But there are some incredible benefits. Like, once you become an employee resource group, people know that you're out there, that you might not reach by word of mouth. They get like, oh, there's an actual Christian group and you've published that and it's supported by the organization. Maybe you get a small budget. Maybe you get guidance, and support on how do you do events. Like at Target, they give us some of the premier spaces to hold our events because we are an official employee resource group. So there are benefits. But when do you make that move is really important, because if there's just a handful of you and you're trying to jump in right with HR from the get-go, that's going to be a formula to burn out. And maybe you don't get to create the culture you really wanted in that group. It's more dictated by the corporate nuance and policies around what employee resource groups are. So I would just slow down in the beginning, like talk to a few other companies, see how you can like step into that and stagger into that. And when it's the right time, I believe God makes it clear. And it's not about us. It's not about getting credit for having a Christian group. It's more about how do we create a culture where we can be the church and really love and be a light in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's such good wisdom, Bradley, because I remember when I was at General Mills and I was leading the change in the culture of within the Christian group to go from kind of the traditional Bible study into more of a organic, hey, this is a community-based Bible study where we're supporting each other. That's the foundation that we talked about, right, within the small group. I was doing that. And then at the same time, I remember I was setting up the SharePoint site. I was setting up a place like a resource landing page. And I was doing all of these things that you would need to do to be able to be acknowledged as an ERG, or to give some type of credibility to the group, to be able to go to the diversity officer at the time. And so I think there was just something interesting that I learned out of that. And to your point, it's just don't rush it. Don't rush the journey that the Lord wants to take you on, because the most important part of it is going to be creating that foundation to then create a sustainable long-term group that allows, a lot of fruit to come out of that. So that's really, really good insight. What would you say? So if for a group that is like, hey, we've been doing this for 2 years, 3 years, or a year. I know we have great people that were actually participating last year at the conference, like Diane, she started something great at CH Robinson, and I don't know where they're at, but what's the natural progression in your eyes in terms of how you've seen people be faithful in the small group and then the rest will progress?
Yeah, I would say if you have multiple small groups that are connected and you have a couple dozen people that are involved, you have the right set where you can start to have people have clear roles where they can help you step into an employee resource group. So for instance, you're going to need to have some operations then. Like it's not like, let's just wing a small group and do a little Bible study together. Your corporation's going to say, okay, well, what's the purpose of your group? Have you documented this? Like, do you have like an official site where you're going to describe what you're doing and what you're creating? And so you'll probably want some people that are operationally inclined that can execute. You're going to want leaders that can actually say, hey, we're casting vision for what this can be. And if it's just you, I would say that's a little bit of a red flag. That's like, you need to have a few more people coming along with you to bring that to life. And I would say also, is there someone that can champion it that maybe is a leader in your org? So I know with Target, John Griffith, who ran our properties business for a really long time, establishing new stores, he was our champion. So he actually went to HR and be like, hey, as an executive on this team at Target, hey, we should have a Christian group. And he held a lot of weight with the HR team. And then I remember Ian Riley and Braden Andrews, like they were leading the way to like have some of these conversations. And it wasn't just, one of us, there was an actual team that was going and saying, what does this look like? And also shaping the definition. And you have to do your homework. So for instance, we had to go model, and back then Medtronic was the model. So they had already done it. So we had to go get their business case and go, it's not just Target. And this is now almost 20 years ago for Target. And now people use the Target business case, like Diane from CH Robinson, to say, hey, well, if Target's doing it, we should for sure be able to do it, at CH Robinson. And so you lay the groundwork. And then if there's anyone who's hesitant to say like, oh no, we couldn't legally like do a Christian network or anything of faith. Well, that's not true. Like that actually gets HR teams in hot water. And so we've actually partnered with some organizations who had to go through more of those legal back and forths. And we give them those resources and say, hey, partner with them. They've already set the precedent for what this could look like. But I would say if you're having healthy growth in your small groups, that's when you start to evaluate, are there a few people that are going to come along with me? Does it start to connect? Like, is there connectivity between the groups, right? Do you have a email that you send out to let people know like, hey, we can be praying for you, or an encouragement? Or do you join your small groups together for a fun Christmas activity or Easter? Like once that starts to happen and you've grown big enough where there's multiple small groups, there's an actual reason to say, hey, we can create some efficiencies and do things together. And people love just to get to know each other. Like they might meet another person on their team who's a Christian who might be in a different small group. And so that ERG allows you to have that connectivity. And I think the biggest benefit is when you're like, okay, we're doing word of mouth, but how we need to get we need to get more marketing out there. And when you're at a point where you want to start marketing, I think that's the exact timing where you want to start an employee resource group. And until that, it's really word of mouth. It's pretty scrappy. You're building it out. But when you're like, hey, we're at scale, we should do a marketing message to the broader corporation, that's when you're going to want to work with your HR team to form an employee resource group. Because you not being blessed by the company, it's going to be coming across as you are, what is it called when you go door to door and be like, you're soliciting, and you don't want to be like the person who's labeled as a solicitor, like you're trying to get someone. It's like, no, our company has approved it. And once you get there, that is when you can have more scale and the company's going to help be officially bless it. But you want to make sure you have the right team, you have the right structure, you have an advocate that's on the executive team. And you want to make sure you're at a point where you truly want to market it to people who might not be as inclined to have favor towards you. So they might not be all in Christians, or they might be nominal, or they might not even be Christians. And you want to make sure that if you're going to put those marketing messages out there, that the organization that you're with supports you as a part of their diversity ecosystem and framework.
Yeah, no, that's the reality there is that's obviously if you're scaling and you're getting, honestly, in the double digits of consistent attendees, and you're kind of creating some solid growth, get to that point of where you need to just take somebody along with you, create kind of some of those systems and put them in place. And then I think there is a reality too of it's going to take time. It's going to take time, and it's okay that it takes time, right? I think, to your point, the Christian network has been around for almost 20 years. Yeah. And so when was the actual acknowledgement, Bradley? Was it year 7, year 8?
Well, we had underground stuff before I was even at Target. So that's 23 years ago. And so I would say it took several years. Like it was over, I think, over a year or two that we worked with and partnered with HR to formally like recognize something. So it's not just like, oh yeah, we're good to go. You're going to have to go through the process. And the nice thing is when you have something already established, it's easier to push it through. If it's just you and one other person, they're like, what are we doing here? But if you're like, hey, we have 4 small groups and there's 100 people represented, wow, that might be bigger than some of the existing belonging diversity groups. So having that allows you to have a better foundation to have some of those conversations. And you can have that. You can have your groups without getting approval. Like you can go over lunch. There is nothing that stops you. It's just more of the peer pressure to say, hey, you can't do that. That's a Christian thing. No, like legally, you have the religious freedom to express that however you would like and work as long as you're respecting others' boundaries. And so if you meet and you do that, it's totally fine. And you can build that the entire way without ever being an employee resource group. You don't even have to cross that line if you don't feel that it's worth, like if there's a lot of, let's say, tension or the HR leadership doesn't want it, like you can still do what you're going to do and not have to have it be officially like recognized. That is completely fine. And legally in the United States of America, you have the freedom of religion to express and to do those things in your workplace without any repercussions. Now, if you're an hourly team member, if you're like on the clock, you got to honor that. You can't just go, I'm going to do this no matter what. But legally, you have the freedom to express your faith and to use that time as you would.
Amen. Yeah, and that's what I honestly would encourage everybody to just take into account as well. And if you're facing those hardships and the barriers of trying to get your leadership to get on board, your HR leadership to get on board, it may not be worth it, and that's okay. And sometimes we just got to put our pride away and just allow the Lord to continue to do His work. And so I think that I love the idea of even with being kind of this underground movement, make it such a cultural value add to your company that the company has to recognize it, even if it isn't officially recognized. Mm-hmm. So I think that could be such a blessing and such an incredible movement to be a part of. Bradley, one other thing that I was curious about as you've kind of experienced this, and as we've been coaching and having conversations with other companies, are there things that they're learning that like, oh, maybe you shouldn't have done that, or maybe we should have positioned it this way to, it would have made it a lot easier for things to happen. Was there anything that you've, I guess, experienced or barriers that people come across that can potentially be not detrimental, but just things that to be observant of?
Yeah, I would say there are definitely learnings where I was like, would never use my energy in that way again. I think when we first started, it was all about events, and it was just like all of this work to get like a top-notch speaker. Like if we can get a speaker, we'll fill an entire conference room. And you would never see those people again. It would be like all these people would come to see the Christian CEO of whatever company, but you was so loosely connected. It was just like these, and there was a lot of energy and effort that went to recruiting speakers and to marketing those events, but it was not connected back to an actual like culture of like living your faith out at work. It was just like, yeah, this speaker happens to do it well. Not a bad thing. But I would say we did that at Target. I know a lot of other employee resource groups have done that. And I would say don't make that your first priority. Like that leads to a ton of workload and a lot of energy and effort that then you don't have that residual like community afterwards. And so how can you be intentional, like for us, to truly make it so it's like people are meeting others that, like, if we look at our mission for living faith at work, where you learn how to live your faith out at work together. And those were more of these inspirational, like, okay, cool, that CEO, like he's the CEO, of course he can do that. Like you're working through like how can you do it. So don't just focus on events. Events aren't bad, but it takes a lot of energy and effort. And if all you do and in your employee resource group is try to put together these big events, it can get like overwhelming, and culture can be based on people that aren't even from your company. It's just whoever you're bringing in, right? And so I would say, how do you really set the priority on creating an environment where you're supporting and discipling and creating, I think you even said it, a little mini church like at Target, at Sprouts, where you're supporting each other. Like you have moments to pray with each other. You have moments to express that. And it's not this like, I'm at a distance. I hear someone speaking about it, but I really don't have a group of people that I can walk through learning my faith at work out at work. And I would say if I could start over, I would have started 100% helping people have that everyday support versus just trying to be super inspirational, like John Maxwell's coming. And then you're like, well, what do we do after this event? Like, how do I actually apply it? Cool, I heard him, speak. And now we can hear all these guys at Global Leadership Summit and all these virtual settings. But how do you actually, so I would say, don't focus on events and make sure prayer is a huge part of it. I think we didn't have a lot of prayer elements in the beginning. And we realized that was the power of like actually bringing the Holy Spirit into some of these conversations. And it's not just the formality of talking about Christianity. Like most people culturally understand Christianity. We aren't here, like an employee resource group will often ask you like, hey, can you talk about like what Christians believe? Like that got us really distracted for a while where we're like with HR and it's like Easter, let's talk about the significance of Easter. And it was more of a theoretical, like nuanced conversation around the historical like documentation of Easter. Not a bad thing, but we realized like, wow, we're putting all this energy and effort into our employee resource group and our Christians are getting very little benefit like from it and they're not growing. So how do we make sure that the culture we're creating is actually helping people live their faith out at work, not just checking a diversity box to say Christians are talking about their important festivals and events. Like that's one thing, but I would say focusing on creating a culture where you really can live out your faith at work is the most important thing.
Well, this kind of then raises the question for me, becoming an ERG, is it really needed or is it not?
Yeah.
Because to that point, Bradley, right? If you're not focused on creating the culture, the environment for people to the point of like a mini church of caring for others, loving for one another, praying for each other, learning with each other, absolutely learning about how we can take our faith to the next level. If that's not the center of what we're doing, then why pursue the ERG? Why even care about it? And I think, this is Jorge's feelings and my personal opinion. I think if you're not getting that right, and if you're not focused on that, don't even bother. Don't even bother to do the ERG. Yeah. Don't even bother to go and try to talk to your HR person.
That's the right bold statement. Yeah.
Right. So and then honestly too, for the individual that's out there or the company, if you're feeling this pressure that you need to start an ERG, I don't know. I think evaluate that. Like, why are you feeling that pressure? Who's putting that pressure on you? And is it truly like a pride thing of like, oh, we're Christians, we're going to have representation? Like, or is it, no, like the Lord has greater plans in place for us to become an ERG because more people are going to be reached within my company. If that's a version of a heart posture, then yes, go and do that. Yeah. But if it's centered around, oh, we just need representation, I think there needs to be a reevaluation there.
Yeah. That's right. And that's often I've had a lot of conversations, even with having the Christian network, where people, it's more about like Christians deserve, like they have this diversity thing, so I want it. And it's like, well, that's not how it works in God's kingdom. It's like, it's an overflow of what's in my heart versus like, well, this group has representation, so I for sure should have it. And it's like, well, what's the benefit of that? Like if there's not a heart posture of like why and how it's valuable to you and others, it's literally just a comparison, right? It's like, I want what they have. And that is not a good reason to start an employee resource group. And a good reason would be like you were saying, God's going to use this to impact more people. Like our reach will be significantly more. And maybe you even influence HR and those belonging communities where you can be the light of Jesus in those settings. That's a good reason. But to say we need representation, and this is a heart posture. I have conversations all the time at Target, even after having it, where it's more just check the box, like someone else gets this. And it's totally a comparison game. And it gets into almost this envy of like, well, they get it because of this. And it's like, why? Like, what? Where's this coming from? Like, you might want to sift through your heart to see what's the motive for wanting more.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this in one of the first episodes that we had was what's your true identity in, right?
Yeah.
Because the Christian ERG can become your identity, but then you've lost the way of who Jesus is to you actually every day 100%. In your life. And so to your point, Bradley, if Jesus is truly the center of your life, who cares about a Christian ERG like recognition? Who cares about this, or that? Like if Jesus is your day in, day out example of how we need to live life, then that is what we need to push every single day and create an environment where people can come to us when they're going through issues, can come to us and both in the faith and out of the faith. It's truly being the light of the world in all settings, being relevant, and then positioning ourselves to be able to have that opportunity through Christ. And so, I mean, I love that.
We're not dogging ERGs. Like God has used Target Christian Network, guys use CH Rob, obviously like CH Robinson shared last year, growing to hundreds and hundreds of people because they became an employee resource group. But check your heart. Like, why do you want to start these? And especially there's so many of you that are listening in that aren't at big organizations. And it might, if you're at a smaller organization, it might not make sense to go through all these hoops with HR. Have your incredible small group, and you might actually be able to reach your organization just with that small group. Like you don't need to go through all the formalities of all the red tape. Like you're in a good spot. And so I would just pray if you're at a point where God's using it and it's growing and this takes you to a level where you'll have more influence and people, it's more accessible than for people. Amazing. Like step into that, but don't just play the comparison game of like, they have it, so we should have something to represent us. Like God's got you. Like the church historically has grown the most and has been in the best place when they weren't the ones running the show and were often under persecution. And so no matter what, God's got you, and don't feel like employee resource group has to be your next step.
Amen. Well, we're at time, Bradley. I think that's a great place to wrap up. I mean, this conversation was awesome, and hopefully people...
Should we do a little summary? Like what are our key takeaways? I feel like if you're at a spot, like, you know, I like a good action like plan at the end of the day. Like if you're at a spot where you're like considering it, maybe like what are the 3 or 4 things that you should like process through and before you jump into like employee resource group. I don't know if you want to recap it, I can recap it.
I mean, one thing that I know one thing that I know for sure is build the foundation. Have a solid foundation, right? And that starts with small groups. The second thing,
employee resource group,
way before, like build the foundation, build the culture, have some great people around you. And then the second thing that I would say is the intent, right? The heart, the heart intent. What's the intent of wanting to go to become an ERG? And then in that intent, do you need to become an ERG, right? Do you need to become recognized by your company, or can you still, to your point, Bradley, fly under the radar with the craziness around you and still make a meaningful impact? Not you, but like let the Lord make a meaningful impact in your organization. And then I don't know if you have another one, but those are my...
And I would say like the practical, tangible benefits, if you think about it, like, are we at a point where we need it to scale, that we are multiplying rapidly, and that this is going to help us with marketing? It's going to help us get into the right rooms to facilitate this. And if you're not at that point, I would say, hey, just keep cruising with your small groups. Like you're doing good. You don't need to force that conversation, and you can pretty much do most of those things without having to take it to the next level of employee resource group. But if you're at that point and you're like, hey, we're ready. We've been praying. God's challenging us to start something, which is a huge step of faith. Living Faith at Work is here to support you. And we've done this dozens and dozens of times. So if you're there and you want some precedent, you want some examples, like if you're running into roadblocks, we're here to help get it started. But once again, we'll say this a million times on this podcast, it's not always your next step. And don't feel like you should be pressured to make that your next step. Just allow God to keep growing it. And if it is, amazing. You have lots of people who will support you. And if not, keep building community and challenging others to live out their faith authentically in the workplace.
Amen. Love you, Bradley. Thanks for this conversation. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate you. Subscribe, like, and all the wonderful things that you can do via our Spotify channel, YouTube channel, comment, and just we haven't been getting emails on topics. So I'd love to just throw out the net. Submit your topics, and we'd love to have the conversation about whatever people are thinking about in the workplace. But yeah, Bradley, thank you so much. Excited about conference coming up here really soon, and excited to get this out there. A month out. Excited to get this episode out there so that people can listen to after conference. But until then, have a wonderful week, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in.